So I've been thinking lately, Generation X is probably the last generation that remembers how it is to live with inconvenience, actual limitation, a television set, one of them with 3 channels, one telephone hung on the kitchen wall, one bathroom for the entire family. And if you ran out of milk on a Saturday night, well, you just did without until Monday. That was normal. And I know when people think of the 1970s, they automatically think of disco balls and avocado green appliances and roller skating rinks. But underneath all of that, there was this heaviness in the air. Massive inflation, factories shutting down, layoffs, gas shortages, parents constantly stressed about money. A lot of families were hanging on by a thread. And it lasted a long time. And kids, us, we probably absorbed a lot more of that than we realized. And lately, watching everything that's happening now, the prices, the anxiety, the overstimulation, the feeling that modern life has become financially and emotionally unsustainable. And I keep having this strange thought. What if Gen X was trained for this? What if Gen X was accidentally prepared for this? Our parents, they taught us how to live without constant convenience. And modern life has slowly trained people out of that. And maybe those difficult parts of our upbringing brought resilience, a resilience that hasn't left us. We still possess that. And in this video, I want to connect the dots between the 1970s and the 2020s, because I think a lot of us are underestimating one of Gen X's greatest strengths. We already know how to adapt when life gets harder. And for real, that may be one of the greatest skills to possess over the next decade. So let's get to it. So I'm sure you've heard the phrase, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Or more commonly phrased as, history is doomed to repeat itself, especially without conscious effort to learn from past mistakes. And just think about it. Now, my grandparents, they had the 1930s, the Great Depression. My parents, the 1970s, the Great Stagflation. And here we are today, in the 2020s. It seems like every generation eventually runs into this period where we have to completely readjust how we live. But many of us, as kids, we remember that last great period in the 70s. And that's why a lot of what's going on today feels a little familiar to our generation. We've seen a version of this mood before, which means many of us, we learned survival skills. Long before we learned words like minimalism, resilience, or financial wellness. So let's talk about some of those things that Gen X knows deep down that's kind of disappeared today. And point number 1 is that we shared everything. And I think that is something today that younger generations, they just don't fully understand. We shared bedrooms, televisions, one phone, one bathroom for the entire family. Me, my mom, and my sister, we even shared clothes sometimes. Meanwhile, today, life is designed around individual ownership. And honestly, I like a lot of that convenience too. Privacy is nice. Personal space, that's great. But convenience and privacy, they come with a monthly price tag attached to them now. And I'm starting to wonder if the reason that modern life feels so financially crushing is that we've totally normalized everyone needing their own version of every single thing. And another strange side effect of that is that we've all become more comfortable being socially isolated, more connected technologically, less connected physically. And I don't think most people want to go backward. I don't think anyone's dreaming about sharing one TV with rabbit ears again. But I do think that Gen X understands something important. Human beings, they can adapt to having less space, less convenience, and fewer personalized comforts. Far easier than modern culture tells us we can. Point number 2 is we knew how to stretch things in the 70s. And this is one habit from that decade that probably needs a comeback. You know, I mentioned this earlier, but the 1970s had this dark cloud kind of hovering over it. And people took that very seriously. They adjusted their lives. They weren't buying new cars. They kept the old car running. They were putting off big expenses. They just weren't happening. They rarely ever ate out in restaurants. Dinners consisted of leftovers and casseroles. We knew how to stretch a tank of gas, even though the cars back then were gas hogs compared to today's cars. And in 1974, Nixon passed the federal Drive 55 law for that very reason, to save on gas. And that led to the whole creation of the song that Sammy Hagar would release later, I Can't Drive 55. But it was passed because of need at the time. And back then, people changed their behaviors because they assumed that their resources were limited. And today, we complain about the prices, but a lot of us keep spending like the resources are unlimited. Okay, point number 3 is we tolerated inconvenience much better. Now, if bringing back the 70s sounds too depressing, then maybe try just bringing back the 70s clock. Remember when nothing was open on Sundays and there were no convenience stores? Not where I lived, anyway. Grocery stores were closed. Restaurants were closed. Every single Sunday. You just knew it. You prepared ahead of time. Wasn't a big deal. And even through the week back then, the business hours, they were a lot tighter. You know, stores, they closed a lot earlier back then. There were no 24-hour stores. There was no instant delivery, no midnight Amazon orders, and much fewer choices. In 1976, if you ran out of milk on a Saturday evening, well, you just did without until Monday. I mean, think about it like this. Consumerism, it stole our Sundays, even a lot of our holidays, and it removed that friction point of only being able to buy things in this restricted window. Now those barriers, they're completely gone. Marketers and advertisers, they're working overtime today. In the 1970s, experts estimate that the average person was exposed to hundreds of ad messages each day. Today, it could be as many as 10,000 every day, even Sundays. No wonder everyone feels mentally exhausted all the time, which means that modern life isn't just more expensive, it's constantly pressuring us to spend. And maybe one form of resistance today is just to purposely consume less. Try a 70s Sunday this week. No shopping, no scrolling, no spending. Just see how much peace you can find in the boredom. Because the harder that life gets financially, the more valuable self-control becomes. Okay, point number 4 is entertainment used to be cheap. So I was born in the late 60s, so I can still remember what counted as entertainment in the 70s. It was 3 TV channels, listening to the radio and records. It was the Sunday newspaper and board games. Back then, entertainment had limits. At some point, it ended. The TV signed off, the stores closed, and you got bored sometimes. Now entertainment, it follows us around in our pockets 24 hours a day. And instead of just once buying a TV and an antenna to go with it, or a one-time purchase of a Monopoly game, entertainment today comes with monthly access fees. Fees that increase constantly. Fees that auto-renew. Fees that never seem to end. That's entertainment. And from what I can remember, my memories consist of things that we did that were always kind of cheap and inexpensive. But I have great memories of them. I remember on very special occasions, because we couldn't afford to do this often, but we'd go to the drive-in theater, and it was a family affair. My mom would start by preparing and popping all the popcorn and putting stuff in a little cooler, our drinks and all of that. And when we get close to the entrance, my dad would tell me and my sister to get down in the back seat in the floorboard and hide and cover up. We had something, a blanket that we covered up with, because they charged you by however many people you had in the car. We did this when we checked into motels as well. He'd tell us to stay hidden until we got in the room. I mean, this was totally normal in our family. Me and my sister, we were glad to oblige. It was kind of a game to us. But tell me in the comments, what was the most frugal thing that your parents did and that they made you do that today might be considered illegal? Okay, point number 5 is summer in the 70s. Well, it must have felt different, right? Now, as this video airs, we're in the beginnings of the summer season here in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, whether we choose to forget this or what, but AC, there wasn't much of that in the 70s. Not even in the 80s at my house. And we like to say today that we cannot survive without it. But there's living proof that we did. And I know we're not going to give up our AC. I know that's too heavy to ask for. But let's just think about it for a minute, because everyone in the 70s, they grew up with box fans in the house. You had them everywhere in the house, or you just had the one and you took it from room to room with you. You left the bedroom windows open at night. And although the house, it might have come with, central heat and air, but you were forbidden to touch that thermostat. Cars back then, well, they would blow air, through the vents, but it wasn't cold air. And when you were outside, you were looking for a shade tree. You'd claim that shade tree, you'd drink iced tea all day. Us kids, we were eating popsicles all summer, or those cheaper freezy pop things. And we're constantly begging to play with the hoses and the sprinklers. That's how we stayed cool. That's how we survived the summers. And somewhere along the line, comfort stopped being appreciated and started feeling mandatory. And that's how it happens. It's human nature. And slowly, you acclimate to temperatures as well. Now, if you were to take us today and just throw us automatically back to the limitations of cooling that we had in the 70s, it would be a lot harder than it actually was for us back then because we were acclimated to it. And that's true with just so many other things. We grow more accustomed to more convenience, more comfort, little by little, until one day we can't even imagine living the way we used to. But just remember that we did. And this is not about cutting out every comfort and convenience so that we can live like 1974 again. But maybe we can reduce our dependency just little by little. Just spend a little less, need a little less, and slowly create more breathing room financially. So maybe we need some more of this again. And I'm not trying to romanticize hardship here, because I want you to hear me on this. Inflation, it was very hard. And today, it's very hard. And families back then really, really struggled. And I know people do today as well. But maybe some of the habits that we accidentally inherited in that era can protect us from the overstimulation and the overspending that we struggle with as a society today. Because the more dependent we become on comfort and convenience and endless entertainment, the more expensive life gets, and the harder it is to reverse and do without it. Now, you know what else the 70s gave us? It gave us those sayings that we heard our parents and our grandparents say over and over. Those of us that grew up in the 70s will remember a typical conversation between child and parent, and it went something like this. Mom and Dad, close the door, you're letting all the heat out. The kid, what heat? It's freezing in here. Well, put on a sweater like President Carter said. What do you think, I'm made of money? Money doesn't grow on trees. Well, can I at least get some new sweaters? When we go back to school shopping, we'll put some on layaway. Fine. What's for dinner? Leftover casserole. So, looking back now, I don't think our parents and grandparents were just trying to be cheap. I think they understood something that we've forgotten for a while. Comfort costs money, and dependency costs even more. And the moral of the story is this. We survived the 70s. And the 2020s, they can reveal even a brighter future. We just got to hold on, stay Gen X strong, and batten down the hatches. Have a great week, and I'll see you again soon.